Father Larry Young, Catholic priest of the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. in the United States of America. The following talk, entitled Reality Therapy, corresponds to a Catholic guided meditation that I also made by the very same name, which I've linked at the end of this video. Therapy is defined as the treatment of a disease. A disease is something that causes us distress, to be without ease or diseased. We experience a fundamental dis-ease in our lives when we lack meaning and purpose. Where do we derive our meaning and purpose from? Our vision of reality, our worldview, what we think is truly the case or the true state of affairs. We live from this vision, so then what then is our vision? In this talk and the guided meditation linked at the end, I'm proposing a broad vision of reality and inviting anyone who wishes to open their minds and hearts to gaze contemplatively at it. My hope in doing so is that we will derive a therapeutic benefit from this vision by the infusion of renewed meaning and purpose into our lives. We can feel deeply recollected, rooted, and grounded, properly oriented, and able to get our bearings. We'll know who we are, where we came from, where we're going, and what we're supposed to be doing in the meantime. In order to capture this broad vision of reality in our field of view, we need altitude. This will enable us to see from horizon to horizon. In my guided meditation, I quoted Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 11 to 13 at the outset, to convey to us the image of our Creator taking us on His back like an eagle and enabling us to take in this broad and expansive view of reality. Like an eagle that stirs up its nest, fluttering over its young, spreading out its wings, catching them, bearing them on its pinions, He makes him ride on the high places of the earth. To achieve the height necessary to see into the heart of reality, our reason must also open up to faith. It's only with both wings of reason and faith that we can gain the sufficient altitude we need in order to see the full scope of reality. I like to call this form of reflection or meditation apogeic. This word derives from Greek and is derived from the word apogee. The apogee is the furthest point the moon is from the earth during its orbit around our planet. The prepositional prefix in Greek, apo, just means away from, and the word for earth in Greek is gaia. So apogeic essentially means getting as far away from the earth as we can. In order to understand something, it's often extremely helpful to just step away from it so that we can return to it in a fresh way. This rediscovery of something was marvelously illustrated by the 20th century thinker G.K. Chesterton in his book entitled Orthodoxy, where he describes a man who set out in his yacht from England on an adventure to discover new worlds. But getting lost in his reckoning, he unwittingly returns to some random point on the English coast and is then convinced that he has discovered a new land. Planting his standard on the beach, he walks up into a village and is immediately filled with wonder and awe at the new world that he is convinced he has discovered, but which he has actually only been led back to and has now rediscovered in a fresh new way. This story is emblematic of Chesterton's whole habit of mind and method of inquiry. As he would say, it takes far more creativity, imagination, and genius to see what is right under our nose, which we may think is common or ordinary, and come to see just how uncommon and extraordinary it truly is. It is this habit of mind of coming back in a fresh way to ourselves and the world around us that I like to call apogeic. Thinking apogeically enables us to see the whole of reality. We each have a deep down desire to see according to the whole. We want to be able to comprehend the totality of things, or according to the whole. We feel this need for a vision big and broad enough to organize all our knowledge of particulars according to the whole, or the grand equation of things. That's exactly what the word Catholic means. It comes from the Greek prepositional prefix kata, which means according to, and the Greek word for whole, which is holocaust. Kata holocaust, or Catholic, literally means according to the whole. It is a vision that spans the entire universe and everything in it, and even enables us to see beyond the universe. I firmly believe that the Catholic faith represents the clearest picture of reality that the human race has. This talk and the meditation linked at the end are an invitation to come back to the Catholic faith as though we were discovering it for the very first time. Hopefully we can then imitate and cultivate the habit of mind of G.K. Chesterton and continuously seek to come back to our Catholic faith in a fresh way every day of our lives. It should be said at the outset that this Catholic vision of reality given to us by our Creator can be elusive and difficult to maintain. With the help of our Creator, we must strive always to maintain a certain inner altitude if we are to profoundly appropriate, assimilate, or interiorize this vision and then live from it on a daily basis. The troubles and trials of our temporal earthly lives can cause us to lose our inner recollection in what is most true and real. We can also be surrounded by many who do not see the same vision of reality, and this too can draw us back down to the earth, and we can lose sight of the whole. The saints are those who, with the support of their Creator, resist this tendency. They are like reality therapists for us. They have oriented and aligned their lives to this vision of reality in an exemplary and heroic manner. For this vision of reality to sink into our hearts and minds, we must realize that our Catholic faith consists in more than just pious notions. This is an attitude that can subtly creep into our thinking. A helpful distinction was made by a theologian of the 20th century, Jesuit Father Bernard Lonergan. He distinguished between notional faith and real faith. When we recite the words of the Creed, we must challenge ourselves with the realization that this profession of faith does not consist of nice, pious notions, but in fact corresponds to reality, to what is truly the case. As the Catechism of the Catholic Church states in paragraph 170, we do not believe in formulas, but in those realities they express, which faith allows us to touch. The believer's act of faith does not terminate in the propositions, but in the realities which they express. When our faith is real, enlivened by our Creator, we will live our faith consciously, deliberately, and intentionally, and it will become the very ground of our existence and the organizing principle of our lives. Now, with these words of introduction completed, I would like to lead you through a series of reflections designed to help us return to our Catholic faith in a fresh way and reappropriate it, beginning with the most basic questions. What does reality consist of, and does reality consist of matter alone, or is there also immaterial reality? We now stand at a fundamental fork in the road, folks. We can choose to walk down the path of the materialists who assert that only matter exists, or we can choose to walk down the path of those who are open to the possibility of immaterial existence. Before we choose, let's peer down the path of the materialists and see where it ends up. According to one famous materialist, the modern British philosopher Bertrand Russell, mankind is a curious accident in a backwater of the universe. When we look at the universe around us through a materialist lens, we see only accident, chance, randomness. There's no higher meaning to existence. Hence, we arrive at the conclusion of another materialist, the Nobel Prize winning physicist Steven Weinberg, who states that it's almost irresistible for humans to believe that we have some special relation to the universe. That human life is not just a farcical outcome of a chain of accidents, but that we are somehow built in from the beginning. It's very hard for us to realize that we are just a tiny part of an overwhelmingly hostile universe. The more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless. Another world-renowned physicist, Stephen Hawking, boldly declares, "I regard the brain as a computer, which will stop working when its components fail. There is no heaven or afterlife for broken down computers. That is a fairy story for people afraid of the dark." Perhaps no one has stated this materialist viewpoint more poetically than Shakespeare's Macbeth, when he utters those famous lines, "Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing." This reasoning may be logical from a materialist starting point. However, is the assumption that only matter exists a sound starting point? The Old Testament book of wisdom first challenges and then describes the materialist assumption quite well in chapter 2, declaring that they reasoned unsoundly, saying to themselves, "Short and sorrowful is our life, and there is no remedy when a man comes to his end. And no one has been known to return from Hades, because we were born by mere chance, and hereafter we shall be as though we had never been, because the breath in our nostrils is smoke, and reason is a spark kindled by the beating of our hearts. When it is extinguished, the body will turn to ashes, and the spirit will dissolve like empty air." The path of the materialists lead ultimately to meaninglessness and despair. So let us now peer down the other path and consider the sound and reasonable alternative possibility of immaterial existence. As strange and wonderful as our physical universe is, the more we come to know it, is it that far-fetched to assert the highly plausible and probable conclusion that reality is also comprised of immaterial existence? Is this merely a cop-out? Is it taking the easy way out of hard scientific study of the material universe by appealing to an immaterial supreme being to fill in the gaps? Or to believe in an immaterial soul out of a fear of death? Is this type of thinking merely the opiate of the masses? Or is it the humble acknowledgement that there's more to reality than what can be measured, weighed, or seen with our microscope or telescope? Why should we limit our method of inquiry to the scientific method alone? Is there more to reality beyond the scope or reach of the headlights of the scientific method? The reasonable intuition of the human race that immaterial reality exists is strongly witnessed to over the millennia as far back as we want to look. The Catechism of the Catholic Church explains that in many ways throughout history, down to the present day, men have given expression to their quest for God in their religious beliefs and behavior, in their prayers, sacrifices, rituals, meditations, and so forth. These forms of religious expression, despite the ambiguities they often bring with them, are so universal that one may well call man a religious being. Let's now move on to the question of the existence of an immaterial supreme being. There are many converging and convincing arguments to consider. We can start by investigating the problem of the beginning, a beginning to our physical universe, in complete and utter nothingness. Up until the 20th century, it was often assumed that the physical universe existed infinitely into the past, and the materialists thought of a creation event as a religious relic or myth. This was proven wrong by a physicist of the last century who studied at MIT and was a colleague of Albert Einstein. His name was Father George Lemaitre. Father Lemaitre developed a proof showing that the physical universe had a beginning from what he called the primeval atom. At first, this was scoffed at by other 20th century physicists and cosmologists, and they mockingly referred to it as the theory of the Big Bang. Now it is settled science, and we know the physical universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old. So what then is the cause of the Big Bang? Is it the Big Bang itself? Contemporary philosopher Stephen Barr explains that this is like saying Beethoven's Fifth Symphony is caused by its first famous notes. Dun 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 dun. Musical notes require a prior composer. For something to come out of nothing, there has to be something else or someone else to cause it to come into being. As contemporary priest and cosmologist Father Robert Spitzer often says, the only thing that nothing can do is nothing. Attempts to get out of the problem of a beginning in absolute nothing involve efforts to sneak something into nothing, like string theory or a quantum gravitational field, but nothing, in the strict sense required, does not admit of this. The problem of a beginning is especially inescapable with the advent in 2003 of the mathematically proven theorem of the cosmologists Borda, Guth, and Vilenkin, which is commonly known as the BGV proof. They show that any expanding universe, or even a hypothetical multiverse, has to have a beginning in space-time. The problem of a beginning is inescapable. All of this points to the logical conclusion of a creative agency that transcends the physical universe. Next, we can consider the question of whether or not the existence of the human race is special and willed by a transcendent creative agency. So we need to examine now the fine-tuning of the physical universe. There are four fundamental forces of physics: the gravitational, electromagnetic, strong and weak nuclear forces. The four fundamental forces govern our universe. And what we see is that from the moment of the Big Bang, these forces were precisely dialed in to allow for life to form in our universe. This universe could quite easily have been very different. Change the values of these four fundamental forces ever so slightly, and the universe either burns out or freezes up, and life would be impossible. When we consider the astounding fact which confronts us that we just happen to live in a habitable universe, and in a habitable age of our universe, in a habitable neighborhood in our galaxy, in a habitable zone in our solar system, on a planet that is just the right size in order to hold down our atmosphere, and a planet which has everything needed for our habitation, including a precisely placed moon that keeps us steady on our rotational axis with its seasons and tides. It is likely that it actually took 13.8 billion years and required a universe that is 100 billion light years across to make a place like this. All of this seemingly providential alignment of habitable conditions for life and for the human race to exist in particular are referred to as anthropic coincidences. However, it is no coincidence for those of us open to the logical and reasonable conclusion that there is a transcendent creative agency that willed our existence. There are other purely philosophical arguments for this transcendent creative agency which are put forward by the philosopher Aristotle in the 4th century BC and which were later refined by the 12th century theologian and philosopher St. Thomas Aquinas, which deduced this transcendent creative agency from observing movement, causality, contingency, beauty, and order in the world. After surveying the evidence for the existence of a transcendent immaterial cause to explain our physical universe, let us now turn to ourselves. Are we human beings reducible to matter alone? Are we each defined solely by atoms, molecules, chemicals, and electrical impulses? The fundamental intuition that there is an immaterial component to our being is ever present in human history. Let us first approach this philosophically. How can matter become self-conscious? It seems self-evident that consciousness or self-awareness requires a spiritual or immaterial faculty to enable us to bend back and perceive our own existence. Furthermore, the existence of an immaterial soul is confirmed by recent scientific studies of near-death experience. About 18% of people who are clinically dead have reported having an out-of-body experience. The pattern that arises from these experiences is that they are accompanied by a transition to another domain, where the deceased person encounters a personal, warm, loving light, experiences a life review, and often encounters deceased friends and relatives. These are people who have a flat EEG, or total absence of electrical activity in the cerebral cortex, and their brain stem has ceased to cause a gag reflex or dilation of the pupils. Okay. How can we explain this scientific data? The experiences they relate do not resemble a drug-induced or dreamlike state, in that they report having a heightened sense of reality, where things happen logically and sequentially, and which are so real that they are often profoundly changed for life. They sometimes return with verifiable knowledge of things that defy explanation. For example, in scientific studies, 80% of those who were blind from birth and have had a near-death experience report being able to see, and yet they have no images to draw from their memory bank. If these near-death experiences are explicable by some bodily reaction to death, why do only 18% of people have them, and why not 100%? Both the philosophical and scientific approaches to the question of the existence of the soul powerfully combined to support the assertion that immaterial existence is a reality we ought to remain open to. We ought to also consider that the existence of an immaterial soul must be caused by something that also transcends the material universe and must be greater than our immaterial soul. It seems quite logical and reasonable to be open to the possibility that a transcendent, immaterial, supreme being carefully prepared this physical universe for our habitation and gave each human being an immaterial soul. If our soul enables us to be personal, self-conscious beings with reason and will, then this transcendent, immaterial, supreme being must also be a personal being, and not simply some force or field of energy. Let us now turn to the next most obvious questions. Does this transcendent, immaterial, supreme, personal being love us? Does this being have a purpose or plan for us? Will this being satisfy the longing for perfect happiness that this being must have put into our hearts? We're now standing before another fork in the road in our inquiry into this fundamental human question of the existence and nature of this transcendent, immaterial, personal, supreme being. We can choose to inquire with reason alone, or we can investigate the question with reason that is open to the possibility that this being might actually choose to get involved with us directly. If we choose the former road of reason alone, we may arrive at the knowledge of the existence of this being, but this being will remain distant and abstract. However, doesn't it seem at least plausible that this supreme being, by whose agency we exist, might also want to make itself known to us and has a purpose and plan for our lives? Many spiritual traditions make this claim to being the result of the involvement of this being with us. But which one is authentic? By reason alone, we can rule out all polytheistic belief systems like Hinduism that assert the existence of many gods that are part of the universe. This simply does not hold water philosophically, as the Greek philosophers Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle pointed out more than 2 millennia ago. This being, which is the ground of all that exists, must be one and transcendent, in that this being must exist independently of all else that exists. Buddhism is an atheistic human philosophy that does not adequately address the necessity of a transcendent, immaterial, personal, supreme being as the cause and ground of all that is. Islam believes in one supreme being, but it's a later Judeo-Christian heresy and really represents a religious regression. I submit to you that Judeo-Christianity alone is the direct result of the involvement of this transcendent, immaterial, personal, supreme being with the human race. So according to Judeo-Christianity, what have we learned about this supreme being through its involvement with us? Well, we know that this being gave us freedom and responsibility. And that even when, as a result of our choices, we experience evil, suffering, and death, this being has the power and desire to save us and heal us. This being launched a plan in human history to save and heal us by entering time and space and choosing particular people in particular times and places in a gradually unfolding plan of salvation intended for the entire human race for all time. This being revealed itself through words, deeds, signs, symbols, and sacraments in an economy of salvation that culminated in the eventual personal entrance of this being into this world in the fullness of time as one of us in order to save us and become more accessible to us. This entrance into our world was long prepared for by this being with a miraculous convergence of prophecy and prefigurement. This event of the entrance of this being into our world is the center of human history. This supreme being has also revealed that it is one being and three persons for all eternity, and taught us to call him Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. These three persons from all eternity are not man or woman, male or female, but divine persons that transcend the difference between the sexes. The first divine person, the Father, makes a gift of himself by eternally begetting a second divine person, the Son, who receives all that he has from the Father and then returns the gift of himself to the Father. And the love between these two divine persons is a whole other third divine person we call the Holy Spirit. Love, by definition, is a reciprocal dynamic that involves relationality. Now we know that the transcendent, immaterial, personal, supreme being is not one solitary person. God is love. A solitary God would certainly have the fullness of the attribute of love, but a triune God is the very relational dynamic of love itself. And what's further revealed is that love is of its very nature life-giving or fruitful. The supreme being is in fact a life-giving communion of persons. We know that we were made by this divine love and for this divine love, and our purpose and destiny has been revealed to us by this triune being, which is the entry of God's creatures into the perfect unity of the blessed Trinity, where God, who is the creator of all things, may at last become all in all. In order to bring us to this destiny, the triune God has given us sacred signs that transmit their divine life to us, which we call sacraments or mysteries. When the Son walked among us, it was his express manifest will that they be administered to us through the family he has fashioned and given to us, called the Church. Our life in our family, the Church, consists primarily in doing what the Son of God told us to do. He is our Lord and we belong to him. The word church ultimately comes from the Greek kyriake, which refers to those who belong to the Kyrios, or to the Lord. Those who choose to belong to the Lord embrace the plan of salvation that he gave us. To choose to reject the plan of salvation offered to us is a tragic poverty. There are many who reject this plan in favor of being spiritual but not religious. This is not progress, but a regression to the state of the human race before God's involvement with us. When the triune God became involved with us, we discovered our true identity as the creatures that they have made in their image and likeness. Each one of us has a dignity, value, and nobility that far exceeds the entire physical universe and everything in it. In any single one of us, if we were the only one in this physical universe made in God's image and likeness, and the triune God had to choose between us and it, he'd always choose us. The physical universe is corruptible and has an expiration date, but because we've been given an immaterial soul, we have something that is incorruptible and has no expiration date. We alone can say I and address our Creator as you. We are the creatures made to share in this personal loving communion with our Creator. Our true and lasting home in eternity has been prepared for us by our Creator and Healer. During this time of trial and testing, we live here as pilgrims or sojourners until we are called home to be with our Creator. To live in the fullness of reality is to embrace the plan of salvation God has given to us, to unite ourselves to His family, the church, where we are able to avail ourselves of all the means of divine life and healing that our Creator has given to us. Our God-given mission is to lead as many of God's children to their Creator, to His plan of salvation, and to His family, the church, as possible before our time here is complete. Heaven is the ultimate reality. Our time here is preparing us or even conditioning us for this ultimate reality beyond time and space. This is the meaning and purpose of our being and existence. To be rooted and grounded in this meaning and purpose is truly reality therapy. If you've not seen it, I invite you to click on the link at the end to experience the guided meditation that is also entitled Reality Therapy. There are 5 more guided meditations on my YouTube channel as well. Please consider subscribing to my channel, and if you find this talk and any of these meditations helpful, please consider sharing them with others. Thank you, and God bless you.